So welcome to Weston-super-Mare. This is a fantastic British seaside town on the North Somerset coast. We're about 2 hours from London. There's a direct train from Paddington, 2 hours 11 minutes should you want to visit. And I am on the Grand Pier. You can see Weston-super-Mare behind me. And I'm going to have a look around this place today. Those who watch me regularly know that normally I do Greek places, Greek seaside resorts and so on. This is not a comparison. I don't think that's fair. You know, this is a great place in itself. The weather is a little bit hit and miss. Here I am. It's mid-August, and you can see I'm wearing a coat. But I want to look at the history of the British seaside town. This is very typical of most of them, and show you what it has to offer.
So when we look at Weston-super-Mare, what we see here in front of us is essentially the Victorian town. But I think the way to explain this place is to go round the headland here, because there are actually two piers, and I'm going to look at the second pier, round the headland, and then walk back along to the Grand Pier and have a look at the history of this place, which goes back to the beginning of the 19th century. So round the headland we encounter the fantastic and abandoned Birnbeck Pier. This was built in 1867, and if you look across the pier and across the bay you can see Cardiff in the far distance, and it just demonstrates actually the history of this place, because steam paddlers used to come across from Cardiff and South Wales and moor at the end of this pier and bring the tourists in. But the tourists then didn't come down into the town because there was so much activity on the island here that they just stayed up here. And so in 1904 the commercial corporation of Weston decided to build the Grand Pier in order to lure people down from Birnbeck Pier here. Birnbeck Pier was actually only closed in 1994, but you can see now the perilous state that it's in, and it's actually a listed monument at risk here in the UK. But you can imagine its heyday, the paddle steamers coming across the Bristol Channel from South Wales, and the holidaymakers just having a fantastic day out.
So there's quite a nice little coastal path that wends its way round the coast of Weston here. But what of the name Weston-super-Mare? How come it's called Weston-super-Mare? Well, the name Weston itself derives from Saxon language, Weston meaning a settlement in the west. But there are many Westons, and whilst no one's absolutely certain of why Weston-super-Mare became called Weston-super-Mare, in Latin, super means up or above, and mare obviously means sea. And so for some reason, at some point, probably in medieval times, people started referring to Weston as Weston-super-Mare. In other words, Weston above the sea. And you can see actually we are a little bit above the sea. It is on a hill. It does go, this Victorian town, up a fairly steep hill, and it makes some sense when you think about it. Now this little harbour or marina here is all man-made. The buildings there used to be an island at the beginning of the 19th century, and fishermen used to row apparently well-to-do people out to that island, and they then go swimming naked off the shore of that island, and they had to go out there because otherwise they'd be arrested for insulting public decency. But then in the mid-19th century, 1850, 1860, something like that, the town made a concerted effort to build this seawall all the way around here, joining the island to the land and trying to create a little harbour, which you see here. We begin to get our first look at Weston-super-Mare itself, and the history of Weston-super-Mare really mirrors that of many seaside towns in the UK, in that there was a popularisation in the early 19th century to a peak in the Victorian era, 1880, 1890, and then a gradual decline in the late 20th century as air travel opened up and people wanted more reliable weather in places like Greece. This town is fantastic. You just have to come here and expect a British Seaside Resort, because that's what you get with this fantastic Grand Pier, and Weston actually has two piers. But the origins of this town go back to the beginning of the 19th century. If you came here in, say, 1790, it was a small fishing village, perhaps 30 roofs and 100 people. And then what happened was that places like Bath and Cheltenham to the north of here suddenly became extremely popular as spa towns. And as part of the restoration, shall we say, that the doctors were recommending the British population at the time, they would prescribe a few days down to take the air by the seaside. And Weston-super-Mare, being relatively close to Bath, Bristol and Cheltenham, benefited from that and started to see a tourist trade. So that in 1808, the first hotel was built here, the Royal Hotel, which we'll have a quick look at now. So in 1808, as I said, the first hotel was opened in Weston-super-Mare, and it was on this site. I'm not sure which part of the Royal Hotel was the original building, and it wasn't originally called the Royal Hotel. But you can see there's a grand ballroom, and it has fantastic views over the sea. And this catered to the Victorians and the Georgians who wished to come down originally to take the water, but then subsequently, as social change occurred, to come down and literally holiday in Weston-super-Mare. Now, right next door to the Royal Hotel, we have another hangover from Victorian and Edwardian times, the Winter Gardens. And this is the point. We talk about summer holidays now in the UK. We go to Greece for the summer, it's lovely. But at that time, it was just a holiday. You took time off when you were able to work, or when you had the money to do so, or when your work would sponsor you to come down here. And obviously, with the British weather, the weather could be pretty bad. So many towns, Cheltenham, Bath, and Weston-super-Mare, had winter gardens, entertainment palaces, if you like, which would allow the visitors to enjoy themselves. Should it be inclement weather? Let's face it, this is the UK. So the heyday of Weston-super-Mare really started with the advent of the railways. The railways in Britain were rolled out by Isambard King de Brunel, who used to live here actually for a period of time. But the railway came here from Bristol and Exeter in 1841, and from that point onwards, this place just exploded because suddenly the travel to Weston-super-Mare was accessible and easy and cheap for people. And people from the factories at the same time were beginning to take off. It's beginning to be allowed, under sponsorship of the owners of these factories, to come down for a week and rest and recuperate. And this place exploded. In 1850, there was a new town plan, and huge areas of the land up on the hill behind me were allowed to be built on, and we got these Victorian crescents that we now see. As I said, very similar to the Georgian crescents of Bath and Cheltenham. And then in 1880, they built this promenade and sea walk. And the place went from having 700 residents in about 1810 as a simple rest and relaxation place for Spartans to a major holiday resort with 30,000 residents. And nowadays, this place has 80,000 residents. Now, put that in perspective for my Greek viewers, that's a similar size to Kalamata. So here we are, down at the Grand Pier itself. Now, it's £1 to get onto the pier. You need a pound coin, you have to go through a turnstile, which seems a bit antiquated, to be honest, because most people don't have pound coins nowadays. But if you want to participate in all the activities, then you get yourself a band, £15 for big kids, £11.50 for little kids. And that gives you access to all the activities on here. I'm just going to walk on with £1 and show you what British Seaside Resort is all about. Come up here, you can probably see turnstiles on the left. You put your pound coin in, and then you can walk on the pier, which is what we're going to do. Now, this pier, as with many piers in the UK, unfortunately burnt down in 2008. One of the big problems with Victorian piers was they had no fire safety, and there used to be a fantastic pavilion on the end here, which was reduced to dust. But fortunately, the local council, aided by charities and donations, has been able to rebuild it. And we see what is ultimately a more modern edifice here now, but still a pleasure garden, similar to that which would have existed here in the Victorian times. So you can see nowadays the entertainment in here is mainly electronic. Obviously in Victorian times it would have been mechanical. There would have been dance halls here, there probably would have been a theatre here, but this is all about consumerism and entertainment for the masses. And this is what the traditional British seaside holiday is all about. Funfair, rides, entertainment, slot machines, anything and everything you can imagine. The pier also affords us a fantastic look back at Birnbeck Pier there on the left, the Victorian town ranged on the hillside here, and round to perhaps the origins of the town, with the hotel, the Royal Hotel, and the Winter Gardens. And you can see the heyday of this place, the development of this place, and it mirrors, as I said before, virtually every seaside resort in the UK. You start off with people beginning to want to explore the idea of recreation and holidays. The advent of the railways opening up these places and making them highly accessible to people, affordable to people. And then ultimately, after their peak in Victorian and Edwardian times, their decline as people's tastes and desires to explore further afield were made accessible by rail and air travel to the continent. As we come off the Grand Pier, you can see in front of us, not only do we have the promenade itself, but there are also shops set back from the seafront, rather like a British high street. Obviously, there is going to be a focus on the tourist here, many eateries and so on, but do not think that this is just a place that you come as tourists. This is a place that people live as well, and those people who live here, they want their typical British high street shops, and they're available. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my little look at Weston-super-Mare. It is a typical British town, seaside town. Obviously, as I said, I'm not trying to compare it to anything in Greece. The weather has improved, however, and you can see how fabulous this place is, particularly when the sun shines. There's so much to do, and if you want a slice of British life, you'd do far worse than to come to Weston-super-Mare. So please watch some of my other videos, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thank you very much.